Hey guys, how you doing? It's Joe Leggett here from Impala Search, and I'm excited to be hosting another episode in our Impala Invites webinar series in Sweden. For those of you that don't know, this series is aimed solely at HR and talent acquisition specialists to give them valuable insight and advice on how to boost their careers. We've had some fantastic guest speakers so far, and the podcast can be found on our Impala Insights page on our website and are launched on Spotify. This week, I'm delighted to be inviting Daniel Dudek, Head of Talent Acquisition at Securitas Group. Today, we'll be discussing a really interesting topic about why making yourself replaceable makes you successful in HR. A little bit controversial there, but definitely a good one. Daniel, over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Joe, for having me as well.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool. So you asked me to introduce myself. So I've been in recruitment for about, and more specifically technical or IT recruitment for about 8 years now.
Yeah.
I've been working both agency side and as an embedded consultant, and I have a background in many known and some less known tech companies. I've been working with Voi, King, Klarna, just to mention a few. And as you said there, Joe, I mean, replacing yourself, maybe we should just pause about that for a while so we can clarify a little bit more about what we mean.
Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. I think, like you say, we're not saying HR and recruiters are redundant by no means. It's more about, I suppose, changing the process. But let's kick it off then there with why you think or what you mean by making yourself replaceable.
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's not really about making yourself redundant. So
Yes.
I mean that you need to go looking for a new job or something like that. It's rather a combination of two insights. And one about leadership, where it's about if you need to tell everyone what to do, you're not really leading them, you're just instructing them. So by making sure that people know why they're doing stuff, why it needs to be done, it's also much more easier to free up your time to work on stuff that matters in the long run for yourself and the organization. And the second insight I would say is automation. Looking closer, I mean, that's the stuff that you're manually doing today that's taking up time and maybe is not what you're really enjoying to do as well.
Yeah, I think.
How can we automate flows of candidates? How can we free up time in your day to make sure that you can focus on the stuff where you need it the most and do things with quality? So I think it's more about replacing administrative tasks, stuff that repeats itself, and making sure that you can focus on the stuff where we actually need a human being of your caliber to work on this stuff.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I know I had a chat with Valerie, one of the people in the podcast last week, and she mentioned time debt and I suppose placing time debt in the right places. So the more we can automate, I suppose, the easier our life is. And let's face it, Daniel, nobody loves doing admin. In terms of where you worked at businesses and managed to create a great automated process before, where have you done that?
So I've done it in many places, but what sprung to mind, I mean, is when I was at Voi, we got a lot of attention. I mean, I was quite early at Voi. I think when I joined, we were about 25 people or something like that. And when I left, we were closer to 300. So it was an amazing experience in many ways. Also a very rough ride for me. I think many startup people recognize when I say it's a little bit like assembling a flight midair or plane midair.
Okay.
So it's really building while you're doing stuff. And as we were growing, and I realized that we needed to hyper growth, we started to automate stuff which I wouldn't automate in a situation that I've been before in my career. But that's basically the screening of candidates we were doing through forms. We tried to push everything pre-COVID to video interviews. So
right, okay. The pioneers, basically.
International thing, right? But just making sure that we try to automate as much of the scheduling as possible, taking away the manual steps, trying different scoring models, having candidates do tests before they were actually interviewing with us, and make sure that we pushed things as far as we could by then. But I think that, like, if you look at how you can automate stuff, I would say look at the flow and just see an assembly line in front of you. And then you see each stage, where is the human input needed and why? And then ask yourself, can this be done in a different way?
Yeah.
Um,
I think with that, it's a very good point, but sometimes people might find it hard when looking at their flow at pinpointing the things that can be automated or can be, I suppose, brushed over. So how do you go about clarifying what aspects to automate and what to keep more natural?
Well, first of all, I think something I picked up during my studies as well. When you build a process, it's better that you have a solid process that you know works,
Yeah.
rather having a process that has a lot of unknowns that can happen in the process. So just by starting, just looking at your process, it might be slow in the beginning, but just making sure that you have a solid process that you know every step of the way, everything is tended to, and then you can start looking at how can we make it faster. Then you just start measuring, okay, from the different steps, what takes time and why. Is it mails going back and forth to potential candidates about finding a time and date?
Yeah.
Well, there's tons of free software out there to help you. We just integrate your calendar and they can select a spot themselves. And
Hmm.
you just removed a couple of steps of you sending emails back and forth. Is it a screening call that takes a lot of time? Well, most CRM systems or ATS systems have the possibility of sending out triggered emails like when somebody applies where you can just ask the screening question straight away and,
Yeah.
and give them a pass or fail depending on their answers to move them further in the process. So it's more about seeing each and every step and see where should we put the human interaction and how can we actually allow the candidate to progress with their application as far as possible before we actually need a human being looking at their application.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's a really good point. I think especially you mentioned obviously you've been in tech recruitment. Everyone in tech at the moment is looking to create something that's automated or to streamline a process, and that's what a lot of engineers are doing. But then it's kind of like overlooked in I suppose recruitment and HR roles, but they're at the forefront of these tech companies, so it makes sense for them to do so. Why do you think it works so effectively though? Like how does it free up your time as a head of recruitment, a head of HR? Why is that more effective to you?
Well, I think it's about how you spend your time, and I think if you have a process where many steps are automated, where candidates also can progress in the recruitment process without interacting with someone at our company, I just think it's quite successful. And then the question is, how far can you actually take this, like the automation part of it? How
Hmm.
far can you take it before interacting with a human being? And we actually did a
Yeah.
project like that on Klarna
Okay.
where we looked at how can we automate the full recruitment process. Could we potentially have someone starting to apply to us on Friday evening and joining us as a colleague on Monday, where
Quite
all the
impressive.
steps, yeah, all the steps are automated. Um, and the answer to the question is yes, it's possible to do that process. Um, Obviously, there are risks combined with it as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you would be recruiting for your own team, let's say we have the best tools, we have the best psychometric tests, we have the best skills tests, etc. Even though I would show up at your office and sit in the desk next to you on Monday morning, you would still question like, who is this guy? Because you didn't get the social buy-in. You didn't allow people to actually interview and meet, and I think that's super important in recruitment. Like, why do we have them meet people across the organization? Why don't we just automate everything? Well, in the end, I think we're social creatures. I mean, we're humans, and
Yeah.
the human interaction and building this social contract between one another is something that's extremely difficult to do in an automated way.
Yeah.
It's
So I think, like you
a
say, it's
conversation.
yeah, we're not making, I suppose, HRs or recruitment redundant. We're just trying to streamline the process to make them better at their job, so they can free up more time and invest in those cultural
Mhm.
interviews, those people interactions, so you can get a better fit. I think that makes sense in terms of when you if we go back to Void, you mentioned obviously you automated quite a lot, and even Klarna. Why do you think it works so effectively? So what was the impact of the automation?
I think that in the end, I mean, one way when you look at automation, you think that okay, we're removing the human from the process, or we're making the recruiter redundant, or making yourself
Yeah.
replaceable. Sure, but you're also putting the candidate in the driving seat, allowing them to take the next step, to drive the process. So instead of you sitting there and actually having to manually move people from one step to another, automating the flow allows the candidate to take the charge and then basically drive their process forward. And you would be amazed to see how many candidates fail to do that as well. And in the end, you can always see, okay, is our process broken, or is it because people are not motivated? But it definitely rids you of what you could call the junk applications that all jobs get, where you get people applying to jobs just because they saw it
just
online.
there, one click apply, we're going to hope for the best, that kind of thing.
Yep. So I think that putting the candidate in the driving seat is something that's quite good. And then making sure that we have the human touch and the human interaction down the line with the candidates we should invest the time with. Because if you have a job, you get 100 applicants in the job, which you probably will just hire one or two of them. So ideally, you would like to spend all your time with one or two that you would hire. And getting as close as possible to that target, I think is something that's very, very desirable. Instead of spending 10 minutes a piece with 100 candidates, you could instead focus your time on the 5 or 6 candidates that are really, really valuable, that might have a shot now or in the future of actually getting the role at your company.
Yeah,
so you're freeing up your time to actually focus on the people that you want to have in the business.
Definitely. I think you made a really good point there with, I suppose, giving the candidate or allowing them to be in the driving seat, because then it tests, I suppose, the commitment from their side as well. Obviously, there's a lot in HR and recruitment about selling the brand and the business that we're in to get a candidate excited, but the candidate also needs to be excited, which I think is a very good point. Right now, then, I suppose, if we look at your career, Daniel, you mentioned, obviously, Voy, Klarna, King, you've just started, well, I suppose I say just, you've recently started a new exciting opportunity. So just over a year ago now at Securitas. So what's your plans there to make yourself not obviously redundant, but to automate processes or to make it more streamlined? What's your plan there?
Yeah, and I think that Securitas actually stands apart a little bit from my experiences before, because I've mainly been working at startups or companies that have been around for just a couple of years or 5-6 years or something like that, maybe Klarna a bit longer. But in the end, what I wanted to see was what happens when we go to a corporate level. How does recruitment look at a huge corporation? Do they struggle with the same things, or is it something different? And I would say 90% of the issues you tackle at a company like Securitas are similar to a company as Klarna or Voy. Because you're basically doing the same thing. You're trying to attract good people to join your company. So the processes are quite similar. And you still need to deal with hiring managers, recruitment budgets, external vendors.
Some are a lot easier to deal with than others. But I think that's a conversation for another day, Daniel.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just to give the listeners an idea of what Securitas does. So, I mean, obviously, we're huge in physical security. But right now, I'm at a part called Securitas Intelligent Services and Global IT. So what we're doing there is creating SaaS products, or as we call them, intelligent services. And the second part of what we're doing is a huge IT transformation within Securitas globally. And Securitas is a huge company. We're 380,000 colleagues, and 60,000 of them work in offices. So just the IT transformation part is huge. And then this new bet on intelligent services, I mean, developing your own products, it makes it similar or as similar as it could be to a startup in this corporate setting. So I haven't strayed too far from home, to be honest.
So you're basically working at, I suppose, a mini startup in a well-established business, which is quite cool in itself. What would you say that the main changes that you made at the start were then to help that recruitment process? I mean, I'm sure they've got a great process already. You don't scale as large as they have done if the recruitment process is broken. But what improvements did you see and make?
Well, first of all, it was about just clarity. Who are we? What teams are they actually at our company? Just making sure that we take the story. You can call it employer branding if you want to take it in a bigger word, so to say. But
Yeah.
I would say it's about creating clarity of who are we, what kind of people do we want, and just making sure that we get the story out there, so to say. Then it's all about recruitment planning, looking at, okay, what kind of roles will we get and when? How have we handled these historically? Because I believe, as you said there, I mean, there is already a process in place, and it's not necessarily you have to go in there and automate it or
Yeah.
redesign it or whatever. It's all about looking at the process, saying, is it solid or not? Where do we have problems? Where do we face delays? And just looking at it from that point of view, and there I could discover a couple of things. I mean, it's something that we could move into then about the hiring managers, that you always expect the hiring managers to have some kind of magic sauce or born with a flair for interviewing. Like if I just put the candidate in front of the hiring manager, they will know what to do, right? And I don't say it's necessarily true. Some are really, really good at interviewing. But most of the hiring managers are, I would say, especially in the beginning of their career when they're just starting to build the teams, they're clueless.
Yeah, I think even if you
So
start in recruitment and you or HR and you start interviewing, your first interview is never the best interview in the world, is it? It's all about
no,
getting that practice in.
no, of course, and I think it's a natural thing. But then it's also, I mean, our responsibility to help them out.
Yeah.
And just making sure that they get the basics right, I think, makes companies stand apart from others. I mean, if I would say, like, okay, if you go basic, state making sure that before the interview, all hiring managers know that you need to read the CV before the interview.
Yeah.
State some excitement for the call with the candidate. Check with the candidate if the time frame for the call is okay.
Yeah.
Ask the candidate how the day is going. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's the basics.
it's basics, but I think many people don't cover that, or I mean, just a simple thing as introduce yourself
Yeah.
is often forgotten by inexperienced interviewers. And
No,
then, of course, yeah, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
no, I was going to say I definitely agree. I think it's a given that they're really good at technology and managing technology teams, but not necessarily interviewing the people to get them on board with the team. It's something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. But yeah, sorry to cut you off there, Daniel, but no, I just definitely agree with that point.
No, and I think you're absolutely right, and that's also what we need to help
Yeah.
the hiring managers to make sure that they get the structure for the call. I mean, if you go into the more advanced stuff, I mean, you can make sure that we use the same scoring models for all candidates, that we provide them some kind of framework for evaluation and comparison of candidates, and try to help them rather than just nag on them. But I mean, the I think that this all happens when you make yourself replaceable. When you automate stuff, that you make
Yeah.
sure that things that don't need your attention don't need your attention. So then you can actually do these kind of things like upskilling the hiring managers, making sure we have a solid process, removing delays, looking for evaluation frameworks, looking into the database, making sure that we have a strategy for our database. How can we handle our silver medal
Yeah.
lists?
I
The talent pool issue that everybody's
yeah.
talking about, but nobody has a clue of how to do.
Yeah, the
Um,
lack of candidates, but there's thousands sitting on a database somewhere. We need to find them. I think you made a very good point there, Daniel, though, with that, I suppose, upskilling hiring managers because of automation. You've got more free time. But when you're doing that, it's probably touching on another point of you can then remove yourself from that interview process. If you're confident your hiring managers can deliver the interviews, they can get the right results, then again, you're not making yourself, I suppose, replaceable, but you're removing yourself from that process so you can invest time elsewhere. So I think it's a really key point you just made there, in all honesty. And it probably touched on, I suppose, the next topic of like recruitment, when to recruit, when not to recruit. I know this is something that you're pretty keen on discussing, but when is the right time to recruit, would you say?
well, It's a good question, because usually what I try to compare recruitments to is sales. And I
Yes.
mean, if you would go into any company and say, okay, now we have a sales period of 3 months, then we will stop selling for 6 months. Um, you would be
It'd
shown to
be
the
like a
door.
mic drop moment, wouldn't it? The salespeople
Yeah,
would look
I
around
mean,
like, what are you on about?
and I think no CEO would ever sign a document saying that where we will have um, uh, a period where we will just do sales and then we won't do sales. Sales are
Yeah.
always ongoing, and I
Yeah.
think that recruitment is the same. It should always be ongoing. I mean, still, you talk about recruitment drives. I've heard about people, I mean, recruiters that are approached by hiring managers all the time. It's happened to me in my career as well. Oh, we need to recruit for my team. I need 3 people. Okay, awesome. When do you need them for? Well, yesterday, ASAP. Didn't I make that clear?
Yeah.
And it's the same story over and over again. Um, and still the insight of that recruiting is something that always should be like continuous, that you always should be working on, and making sure to build a talent pool. I think that in the end, just because we bury ourselves in administration, we
Yeah.
don't really get to the point where we can actually have this small machine that actually works for us, helping us to recruit on a continuous basis. And also, I mean, it's about our role in a company. Is it an administrative role that we want, or do we want to be business advisors and actually help to grow the business?
Yeah.
Because
More
then we
like that.
need to be in the planning stage as well.
Exactly, more at that consultancy side. So with that, I suppose, to be always continually recruiting, Daniel, do you think that means to continually hire, or is it going about the process in a different way?
Well, I think you always need to know, is there a general need to hire? I mean,
Yeah.
if I would say I have a great software developer that fits our tech stack, well, I think many companies would just jump at it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but having a pool of interested people, it just makes your job easier again, right?
Hmm.
If you have a pool of 200 account managers that went through your first process steps that you know are good based on that, well, shooting them an email about that we're opening a new account manager position,
Yeah.
it's a high ROI. You have people that are likely already interested. But however, here you come back to the database management. Do you know who these people are, or the people that
Yeah.
came in as silver medalists? And often you don't. And the answer that, or the question you have to go back to is why? Why don't I know who these people are? Well, because I don't have the time to actually sort my database, or to tag them in a good way. Okay, why don't you have the time? And
Yeah.
there we are at the beginning of our talk again. Like, why should you make yourself replaceable? Why should you automate stuff? Well, it frees up time. So in the end, you can make really smooth recruitments.
Yeah, I think my manager Ivan's going to love you for saying that, Daniel, because he literally swears by our CRM system. He's consistently telling us to update it, and it does work though. You keep things up to date; it's a lot easier. And like you mentioned, there's always going to be those silver medal candidates or those people that have passed technical interviews. They've passed through 3 stages, and somebody else has been right at the time. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be right now. So, what would your tip be for staying on top of that or keeping those people continually engaged?
That's the $1 million question right there.
So I'm asking. I want to write down the answer, Daniel.
No, there are many ways of doing it, of course, but something that I've been doing before is keeping the silver medalist pool separate,
Okay.
and inviting them. Well, this was pre-COVID when we did this, but inviting them to specific events that might be interesting for them. So if it's silver medalists that are data scientists,
Yeah.
and maybe if we're a bigger company, then we have the ability to maybe have 200 or 300 of these silver medalists over the course of a couple of years. Then it's easy to invite them to events. It's easy to just build your brand with them. I think they're sending out email campaigns and stuff. That's all great, but someone has to read the email, and I think it's most exciting to the person that compiles the email. And if you're not excited about compiling the email, no one will be excited about reading the email, right? So I think that using events to actually activate the database, having them talk to you, and just keeping them closely to your company, again, it increases the possibility of them being interested again when you open up the position. It's not really a magic sauce, but it's all about keeping them in the loop, what's happening. If you have a data science department, you can send a specific news from what's happening at your data science department right now. We're trying out this and that, or we're working on this, and just keep them motivated by very, very specific information, because they won't care about general company stuff that they can find out themselves. But if it's something very specific that comes once a quarter or once a half a year, that's enough, because then they will stay in your database and they will continue to consider you as an potential employee, right?
Your brand's out there as somebody that cares as well, isn't it? I think if I think another big thing, so another shout out to Ivan here, I'm going to make him famous, but it's always like give before you take. And I think if you do offer it like help and advice to people, or you do keep them in the loop, they're more than likely going to come back. Whereas if you forget about them, like you're saying, just send that mail shot out with, hi, we're X, Y, and Z company, we've just received this funding, then it isn't as exciting as let's have a chat around. I know if you're in security, like let's do like a pen testing event and let's get everybody involved and see who wins. So I think that's really useful advice in all honesty, Daniel. Have you had experience of doing that before then, or is this just something you've thought about with Securitas?
Not at Securitas. We did play around with it at Klarna. Just because it's also, I mean, Klarna is a successful company, but has also quite a lot of recruitment challenges. So they're using quite a lot of external providers. And I think that sometimes I would say it makes sense to have an external provider. For example, if you look at a specific recruitment saying like, there's no scalability in this recruitment, it's a unique recruitment for us, we don't really have the competence of doing this kind of recruitment. Wonderful. Go external. Use an external agency. Pay them what they want to be paid, and make sure it's a good candidate that you get in.
Yeah.
If it has, however, part of your core business, it's like we always will need JavaScript developers. Okay, for a period of time, a peak or similar, use agencies. But if you're in the long run continuing to use agencies, you need to face the truth that if there's something that's not working in your internal organization, like why are we actually dependent on these external vendors? And actually, to answer your question there, so that was what we were looking at. Like, how can we use these silver medalists, or people that came quite far in the process and weren't really hard rejects? It's rather like, oh, they're not really at the right level yet, but in a couple of years they might be there. Or maybe candidates that declined us. I think that was the most interesting category.
Yeah, definitely.
Candidates that said that we wanted them, we gave them an offer, but they declined the offer.
Yeah.
Why? And nobody was digging into that data, which fascinated me. And so I started reaching out to these people that declined our offers. And I would say I got maybe an 80-90% response rate of these candidates, and really good insights on why they declined. If they would like to be part of actually events, meeting up with us and keeping in touch. And they were overwhelmingly positive. Just that I reached out and asked them if they wanted to stay in touch with us, which for me it's something like a recruitment 101. Okay, we have candidates that we wanted to hire before. And we can't forget about them. We need to stay in touch with them. It's like having a lead at a sales department where, let's say you're selling cars and they went to the other dealership and bought a car. Well, they're going to need a car again in 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Let's stay in touch. Maybe in 2 years. Maybe it'll change even quicker than we anticipated, right? It's the same thing here. Just keeping in touch with candidates that declined your offer, I think is key. And then inviting them to events or just having very specific info sent out to them, or having webinars that are very, very specific to that target group. I think it's for real, to be honest. It's
well, it's small time investment for, I suppose, a big return, and even that feedback as to why they potentially rejected the offer, you can then use that, I suppose, to change your interview process or to change your offering to get more people accepted. So I think that's really useful in both parts. I'm going to have to disagree with you, Daniel, and say agencies are valuable all times, every time. Got to throw that in there. No, I'm joking. In terms of you and your career, though, you've obviously achieved a lot. You've moved on to a lot of new challenges. What would you say, if you were to look back on your career and somebody was to give you advice at the start in terms of, Daniel, if you do this, this, and this, it's going to make you more successful. What would your 3 key pieces of advice or tips be to anyone looking to excel?
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I would start by something I truly believe is the most powerful driving force when it comes to actually staying in recruitment, and that's curiosity. Taking every opportunity to learn from the person you're speaking to, understanding their situation, learning about what they're currently doing at their job, and just having that natural curiosity and not running out of it, and just staying curious and always focused to learn new stuff will get you through the rainiest days and the worst days of your career, because you will at least feel that you're growing, you're learning new stuff. And then the interviews, etc., are not like, oh, it's an interview. It's not okay, cool. It's a learning opportunity. I'll talk to someone who works at Amazon. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And just seeing yourself more as a reporter or interviewer rather than someone has to ask questions just for the sake of asking questions, right?
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think curiosity. I think if you're more curious, you want to learn, you want to engage, you want to be better. If you're disenchanted, then you're not going to want to learn. It's like if we link back to the candidate email. If you send them an email, they might not be interested, but if you then invite them to an event, they're going to be curious, so they're going to be interested and stay involved. So I suppose it's the same, but on the other side, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking about because you said 3 things. It's always 3 things, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about the second thing. It's actually something that echoes in the back of my head all the time, and it stays true in so many situations. It's something I learned from an entrepreneur back when it was way over 10 years ago, and he had a little note posted on his screen, his computer screen, where it says, it's not in Swedish though, but the translation would be, if it's right, it goes light, which means basically if something goes very smoothly, then it's the correct decision. If things start to get complicated and you don't really understand what you're doing stuff, then you should just back out immediately. And I've seen it stay so true with candidates where you had these experiences where you just had great candidates, it felt like they pushed themselves through the recruitment process and you hired them and you're really happy with them. And then you have the candidates you need to chase, you don't really get the time, they don't show up on the interview, etc. And my experience just says, like, let's drop it there. Or you start a new job and you feel 4 weeks later or 6 weeks later, like, this isn't really taking off. Well, I'm all for persistency, but sometimes you just have to realize, like, this wasn't a wise decision. Because if it's right, it goes light. Then, you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb on a tree, right? So,
I've never ever heard that before, Daniel, but I'm going to use it.
And then a new one for me, actually, I don't think it would have made that much sense 10 years ago because the tools weren't there. And that's about data, of actually gathering data. Even though you don't have a clue of what to do with the data, gather it, look at it, and try to make sense of it. Try to see, what kind of stuff can I learn from this? What kind of insights are there? We recently started doing that throughout our entire recruitment process. And some things and some insights were so simple. I just asked candidates what they thought about the job ad. And then a couple of candidates said to me, well, it would have been great in the job ad if you could have included your hiring process so I could have an overview of it.
Yeah,
well, bingo. That's a very, very easy improvement. And it's like a 101 thing that should be in the job ad that the candidate actually is looking for. Like, how does this hiring process actually look like? Maybe I'm in a couple of different hiring processes at some stages, or I don't want to spend all my spring and summer interviewing for this company if they're 20 days, right?
Yeah. Well, I suppose with your automating processes, kind of Friday to Monday, what seems to be processed quick, which is good. But no, I think that were 3 key pieces. So first of all was curiosity. So if you're curious about the role, you're going to succeed. If it's right, it goes light. And something I'm going to take away, you can't judge a fish or how it climbs a tree. And then finally looking at that data and just gathering insights from that data to make your process more streamlined and more effective. So I think if we look at the overall topic, Daniel, just to confirm, it's not about making yourself redundant. It's about managing your time and putting your time in the right places. So automating as much as possible to make sure that you can deliver the best, I suppose, that you can be at your role for the company that you work for. Is that right?
Absolutely, and I think that just adding to that, what I would say, what I have as a tagline on LinkedIn is something that I'm actually living by, and that's building companies by supplying great
people. Yeah.
If you have that as your mission, like what is my mission? Is my mission to sit and interview as many candidates as possible? Is it my mission to just build the best administrative process in the world? Or is it to make sure that we build this company by getting the best people in? It shifts your focus to see like, okay, what is my role in this? Where do I get the most leverage on my time?
Yeah. I think that definitely makes sense. It's probably defined by, again, another thing on your LinkedIn, the last line of your bio at Voy. So you help grow the business from 30 to over 280 and then replace yourself with a great VP of HR. So it's finding those right people to then excel the business forward. I think definitely a message to do. But I think that the podcast, Dan, I've definitely learned a lot and picked up a couple of things. I've been continually taking notes throughout, actually. So I'm sure the audience has. So I've got to say thank you very much for taking part. I know you've definitely added some value to the people listening in. As always, guys, the people that are listening, thank you very much. The podcast will be on our YouTube channel, it'll be on our Impala Insights page on our website, and we're also launching on Spotify. So really appreciate your time, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, Joe, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no worries. See you later, guys.
Take care.